The bill no longer audits the Fed. In fact, the legislation gives Congress no control over the Fed's authority to make monetary policy. That perhaps a worthwhile debate, but it does not require any transparency either in the Fed's secret agreements with foreign central banks, not to mention the monies that are pushed out to our own banks. Committee Chair Barney Frank told his constituents back in August that Congressman Paul's plan would pass, likely in October. For the record, it is now November, and there is still no vote, and if there were to be a vote, it would be on a gutted version of the bill. 13 committee Democrats currently signed on to this shell of the Fed audit bill, and now we wait and see if they'll stand up for real change or just push through more false solutions in Washington, D.C. Joining us now, Republican committee member Ron Paul, who originally proposed to audit the Fed. He will present an amendment before the full vote to get real reform back into the legislation. Chrystia Freeland is also here. Representative Paul, in brief, explain to all of us why you think it is so important that the American taxpayer be able to see what is going on inside of the Federal Reserve. Why does that matter? Why should we care so much?
Well, it's because everybody uses dollars as our currency. It's an international currency, so it is very, very important. And yet it's managed by a small group of people, really run by the Federal Reserve Board chairman, and they decide each and every day how much money there should be printed that week and what the interest rate should be. So they are the central economic planners. And since they can create credit out of thin air and then take care of their friends and buddies, which means the burden is placed on the taxpayers, not directly with the tax, but indirectly by devaluing their money. And that means that every time a price goes up, whether it's medical care costs or education, you're really paying a tax. But the thing that gripes me most is it's done secretly, and they are supposed to be like they're sacred and never have their books open. But one thing good has come out of this crisis, that the American people are demanding transparency, and I think that's why I've gotten so many co-sponsors of this bill. We do have 130 Democrats on this, 608 total supporters of this bill, so it'll be a shame if we don't get this through. And it is true, it's going through the committee right now, and today or tomorrow I might have my chance to offer my amendment and put it into the bill.
Congressman Paul, who is opposed to your push for transparency? Who's fighting it?
The Fed. The Fed is and they've actually, I think for the first time in their history, hired a lobbyist. And the lobbyist used to work for Enron. So they're diligently, pumping up the fear. Oh, if we knew what was going on in the Fed, it would cause tremendous inflation, it would cause interest rates to go up, and all sorts of things. If we knew what was going on, we might create a financial crisis. And, it's the Fed and the banks and the big corporations and some of the politicians are in the know and getting benefits, but the system depends on the control of money. But this is not new. This is historic. The king in the old days always had control of the money. They did it in different ways. They clipped coins, diluted the metal, printed money. Today, it's really sophisticated. It's done secretly with a computer, and that's why it's made it so much more dangerous than ever before.
But let's just back away for a second, because the Fed lobbyists, some of the corporate CEOs, the bank CEOs, quite honestly, may have a point. What if we were to look inside the Federal Reserve, as you suspect, I certainly suspect it, I think Chrystia Freeland suspects it, and anybody who understands how our financial system was built over the past 10 years suspects that all those trillions of dollars at the Federal Reserve that were collateral, that is money basically, or collateral, I should say, taken from the banks, is worth far less than it's currently being represented as. So let's say we got $8 trillion at the Fed, maybe it's only worth $4 trillion. And everybody's basically trying to cover up the fact that there's this huge hole, this huge fraud has been perpetrated by the banks, and the fraud would reveal itself, truthfully, if they were to audit the Federal Reserve, and that would cause panic. How do you, let's assume they're right. Let's assume that you're right. Let's assume that this is worthless crap at the Fed. How do you deal with that fallout if in fact we get what we want and they open the closet and what you think is in there, which is nothing?
But pretending it's worth $8 trillion, it's worth $2 trillion or even less doesn't solve our problems. It just delays the agony. For me, it would be like in medicine, somebody had cancer and we treated them with aspirin and say, oh, you don't want to know the truth and give you real treatment. You have to know the truth and you have to have the real treatment. And today, they won't look at the real truth and the cause of the business cycle and the cause of the financial bubble and then the breaking of that, the bursting of that bubble. What they're doing is just saying, oh, all we need are more regulations. corporations, and what we need to do is prop up all the bad debt. We don't want liquidation of debt. We don't want the prices down. Let's stimulate housing, and on and on. So they're doing everything that caused the bubble before to try to reinflate the bubble, and believe me, they're not going to be able to do it this time.
Yeah, go ahead, Christian.
I was going to say, Congressman Paul, I agree with you that there is a little bit of an irony in the fact that in curing a crisis which was caused by too much money pumped out, one of the cures turns out to have been spending more government money. But don't you have to agree that that cure has turned out to be pretty effective? We haven't had a second Great Depression. The financial crisis has more or less been resolved. Isn't that better than having a total freezing of the financial system, which it looked as if we might face last fall?
Not long term. What if it turns out that we're in 1930 and we have another 15 years of problems ahead of us? So, no, I think we're still kidding ourselves. They say the GDP is up, but they printed money and they spent the money, and when government spends money, the GDP goes up. So why
sure, but isn't that better than the alternative of the entire economy just screeching to a halt?
No, it really isn't. You have to bite the bullet. You have to admit the truth. You have to make the right corrections. We used to do this. We've never had a perfect system. There was always abuse of the gold standard, but when they got out of whack, they allowed the correction to occur rather quickly. The best example was the Depression of 1920 and 1921. It lasted about a year, and people did go bankrupt, and it was really tough, but it's not even a historic event. It was the introduction by Hoover and Roosevelt that the politicians can't have hands off. You have to, now that we have this sophisticated Federal Reserve, we'll never allow recessions to occur. They took the recession of the early 30s and turned it into a depression. Yeah. So no, you can't do it. It is better. It's sort of like trying to get somebody off drugs. What you're talking about is you don't want the withdrawal symptoms, and I admit there will be withdrawal symptoms. But keeping them on the drug, which is easy money, easy spending, and huge deficits and all that, that'll kill the patient. And the patient, for me, is the dollar, and we're going to be on the verge of killing the patient. And when you see gold up at $1,100 an ounce, that's a little bit of a warning sign. That might only be the beginning of what we're going to see.
But what if you just decided that you just didn't care about the children? If you don't care about children, isn't it better just to ignore it?
Well,
I mean, because if the heck with the kids, it's easier if we just print the money and go out to dinner, don't you think?
Oh, yeah, that is live high on the hog, and maybe the bankers won't come and get us, but the bankers always come, and in this case, it's the market that is coming. When an individual lives beyond his or her means, they must be forced to live below their means. When a country does it, they will be forced to live below their means, and I believe that the lowering of our standard of living actually has been going on for about 10 years, because the good jobs have been disappearing, the standard of living isn't really going up, so we're holding back the correction, and it doesn't look so bad. So yeah, we didn't crash into a depression, but what we're doing is preventing the good policies to come back, which means free markets, sound money, limited government, balanced budgets. All these things are totally rejected here because this place in Washington, D.C. is run by Keynesians. Keynesians leaning towards socialism now because we're buying up the companies.
Well, it's also,
so no, we cannot solve our problem.
It's also easier to print money. You'll appreciate this story, Congressman Paul, and I'll let you go. I was talking to a couple of bankers the other day as to why it is that they're still trying to keep 80% of the swap market, which is the crooked insurance market, in private. And they said, well, because if we bring it into public, then we'll have to post collateral, and we don't have any collateral. And so it's easier just to keep it in secret than to bring the entire credit default swap market into public and reveal that there's actually nothing there for a market that is 9 times the size of the global economy.
But you haven't learned the language yet. They're just illiquid, temporarily illiquid.
Sorry.
But if you use a worthless instead of illiquid, then why should a taxpayer ever be stuck for something that is worthless? And that is what's happening.
Well, listen, keep us posted. I think the most interesting part in this context, in the context of a conversation at MSNBC and in the political context, because these are such self-evident aspects at this point, is why are our politicians so hesitant to get their hands dirty and do the hard work, as troubling as it may be? And why do they continue to indulge the political expedience of money printing? Because it's quite simply an easier road to take.
I think you got it there.
All right, listen, Congressman Paul, thank you. Keep us posted.